Chapter 1. The moment you were meant to arrive. You did not find this audiobook by accident. There are moments in life that appear ordinary on the surface, yet carry a quiet weight beneath them. A random click, a sudden curiosity, a pause in your routine that leads you here. These moments are rarely recognized for what they truly are. They feel casual, almost insignificant, but they are not. Something in you shifted before you even pressed play. Perhaps it was subtle. A feeling you could not explain, a quiet restlessness. A sense that something in your life, no matter how well it appears to be functioning, is not fully aligned. You may not have had the language for it. You may not have told anyone, but you felt it. That feeling is not confusion. It is awareness trying to surface. Most people spend their lives moving from one distraction to another, never stopping long enough to notice that inner signal. They override it with noise, with routines, with responsibilities, with endless thinking. But sometimes something interrupts the pattern. This is that interruption. The idea that the universe sends you what you are ready for is not poetic language. It is a precise observation of how awareness unfolds. You do not receive deeper truths when they exist. You receive them when you are capable of perceiving them. The difference is everything. Truth has always been present around you. In conversations, in silence, in your own thoughts, in the patterns of your life. But perception acts like a filter. Until you reach a certain level of internal readiness, those truths remain invisible, not hidden, just unseen. Readiness is not about intelligence. It is not about education. It is not about how much effort you have put into searching. Readiness is about alignment. It is the moment when your internal state becomes quiet enough, open enough, and honest enough to receive something without resisting it. It is when you stop trying to force answers and become willing to recognize them. That is why this moment matters. You are not here to learn something entirely new. You are here to remember something you have been sensing for a long time. There is a difference between information and recognition. Information feels external. It feels like something added to you. Recognition feels different. It feels familiar, almost obvious, as if something inside you says, "I already knew this, I just never saw it clearly before." That is what this audiobook is designed to do. It will not try to convince you. It will not attempt to overwhelm you with complex ideas or abstract theories. Instead, it will guide your attention back to what is already within you, waiting to be acknowledged. But there is something important you must understand before going further. The mind is conditioned to seek control. From a very early stage, you are taught that outcomes are achieved through effort, pressure, and constant thinking. You are rewarded for pushing harder, planning more, and trying to predict everything. Over time, this creates a belief that control equals safety. But control, in its extreme form, becomes resistance. You begin to grip life too tightly. You try to force clarity before it naturally appears. You chase certainty instead of allowing understanding to unfold. And in doing so, you create tension between where you are and where you think you should be. That tension blocks perception. The more tightly you hold on to control, the less you are able to notice the subtle signals that guide you. This is why many people feel stuck, even when they are doing everything right. They are trying harder, but seeing less. What this audiobook will gradually show you is that clarity does not come from force. It comes from alignment. It comes from shifting your internal state in a way that allows you to perceive differently. This is not passive. It is precise. You are not being asked to stop acting. You are being invited to act from a different level of awareness. And that shift begins with a simple realization. You are not as disconnected as you think. There is an intelligence operating through your life that you may have ignored or misunderstood. It does not communicate through loud, dramatic signals. It communicates quietly, consistently, and often in ways that are easy to overlook. It appears as intuition, a thought that feels different from your usual thinking, a sense of knowing without explanation, a subtle pull towards something that does not yet make logical sense. Most people dismiss these signals because they are trained to trust only what can be proven immediately. But intuition does not function that way. It does not argue. It does not insist. It simply presents itself and waits. When ignored, it becomes quieter. When followed, it becomes clearer. This is where your journey begins, not with a dramatic change, not with a sudden transformation, but with a shift in attention. As you continue listening, you may notice something unusual. Certain ideas will not feel new. They will feel remembered. Certain moments may cause you to pause, not because they are complex, but because they resonate in a way you did not expect. Pay attention to those moments. They are not random. They are indicators that something within you is responding, and that response is the beginning of alignment. You do not need to rush this process. In fact, rushing will take you further away from it. What matters is not how quickly you understand everything, but how deeply you allow yourself to recognize what is already true. There is a reason you are here now. Not earlier, not later. Now. And as you move forward, one idea will begin to unfold more clearly than anything else. You are not waiting for your life to change. You are learning to see it differently. Chapter 2. The Illusion of Control and the Art of Letting Go. There is a quiet tension that lives beneath the surface of most lives. It does not always appear as stress or anxiety, although it often becomes both. Sometimes it disguises itself as ambition, discipline, or responsibility. It convinces you that everything depends on how tightly you hold things together. It tells you that if you relax even slightly, everything will fall apart. This tension is rooted in the belief that you are in control of everything that matters. At first glance, this belief feels empowering. It suggests that through effort, planning, and persistence, you can shape your life exactly as you want it. It gives you a sense of agency, a feeling that nothing is out of reach if you are willing to work hard enough. But beneath that surface, there is a hidden cost. Control, when misunderstood, becomes pressure. You begin to believe that every outcome is your responsibility. Every delay feels like failure. Every uncertainty feels like a threat. You start measuring your worth based on how effectively you can predict and manage what happens next. And when life inevitably refuses to follow your plans, the tension deepens. This is where the illusion reveals itself, because despite all your effort, there are forces operating beyond your control. Timing, other people's choices, unseen variables and circumstances you could never anticipate. No amount of overthinking can fully account for them. No level of planning can eliminate uncertainty entirely, and yet the mind continues to try. It tries to solve life like a problem that can be completed. It searches for guarantees in a world that does not offer them. It tightens its grip, believing that more control will create more certainty. But what it actually creates is resistance. Resistance is not always obvious. It does not always feel like struggle. Sometimes it feels like constant thinking, like the inability to relax, like replaying scenarios in your mind again and again, trying to find the perfect answer. It feels like needing everything to make sense before you can move forward. This is the exhausting part, because life does not wait for perfect clarity. It moves regardless of whether you feel ready or not. And when you try to control every detail, you place yourself in opposition to that movement. You begin to push against the natural flow of events. Letting go is often misunderstood in this context. It is mistaken for giving up, for becoming passive, for not caring about outcomes. But true letting go is not the absence of action. It is the absence of unnecessary resistance. It is a shift in how you relate to what is happening. Imagine holding something in your hand as tightly as you can. At first, it feels secure. But over time, your hand begins to ache. The tension builds. Your grip becomes uncomfortable, even painful. Now imagine loosening that grip, just slightly. The object does not disappear. It does not fall away. It remains in your hand, but without the strain. This is the essence of letting go. You are still engaged, you are still present, but you are no longer forcing. This shift changes everything. When you stop trying to control every outcome, you create space for awareness. You begin to notice things you were previously too tense to see. Opportunities that did not fit your rigid expectations, solutions that arise naturally when your mind is not overwhelmed with pressure. You begin to respond instead of react. Control operates from fear. It assumes that without constant effort, things will go wrong. It anticipates problems and tries to prevent them before they happen. While this may seem practical, it often leads to a state of constant alertness where you are never fully at ease. Trust, on the other hand, operates differently. Trust does not mean believing that everything will always go your way. It means understanding that even when things do not go as planned, there is still a larger process unfolding. It means recognizing that not every delay is a setback, and not every unexpected turn is a mistake. This is where the art of letting go begins to take shape. It is not about abandoning direction. It is about releasing the need to control the path in every detail. It is about allowing life to meet you halfway. There is a rhythm to life that cannot be forced. Just as you cannot rush the growth of a seed by pulling on it, you cannot accelerate certain outcomes by applying more pressure. In fact, too much force often disrupts the very process you are trying to influence. Consider how many times clarity has come to you, not when you were actively searching for it, but when you stepped away, when you relaxed, when you allowed your mind to settle, when you stopped trying so hard to figure everything out. That is not coincidence. Clarity requires space. When your mind is filled with tension and constant effort, there is no room for insight to emerge. Everything becomes noise. But when you release that pressure, even slightly, something shifts, your perception opens. You begin to see connections that were always there, but hidden beneath the noise. This is why letting go is not weakness. It is precision. It is knowing when effort is useful and when it becomes counterproductive. It is understanding that there is a difference between taking action and forcing outcomes. One is aligned with the natural flow of life, the other works against it. Many people resist this idea because it challenges everything they have been taught. They have been conditioned to believe that success comes from relentless effort, from never slowing down, from constantly pushing forward. And while effort has its place, it is not the only force at work. There is also timing. There are moments when action is effective and moments when patience is required. The difficulty lies in recognizing the difference. Control tries to act at all times, regardless of whether the moment is right. Trust allows you to sense when to move and when to wait. This sensing is not logical in the traditional sense. It does not come from analyzing every possible outcome. It comes from a quieter form of awareness, one that becomes accessible only when the mind is not overwhelmed with control. You have experienced this before, even if you did not notice it. Moments when you knew what to do without overthinking. Moments when things seemed to fall into place without excessive effort. Moments when the right opportunity appeared at the right time, not because you forced it, but because you were open to it. These moments are not random. They are examples of what happens when you are aligned rather than controlling. Alignment does not mean everything is easy. It does not remove challenges or uncertainty, but it changes how you experience them. Instead of feeling like you are constantly fighting against life, you begin to feel like you are moving with it. There is less friction. And with less friction comes more clarity, more creativity, and a deeper sense of stability that does not depend on external conditions. Letting go also requires honesty. You must be willing to recognize where you are holding on too tightly, where you are trying to force answers that are not yet ready to appear, where you are resisting what is happening instead of working with it. This is not always comfortable, because control often feels like safety. It gives you the illusion that if you just try hard enough, you can avoid uncertainty. Letting go means accepting that uncertainty is part of the process. It means acknowledging that you do not need to have everything figured out in order to move forward. This is where growth begins, not in the moments when everything is clear and predictable, but in the moments when you choose to trust, even without complete certainty. When you take a step forward, not because you have all the answers, but because you are willing to discover them along the way. The art of letting go is not learned in a single moment. It is practiced. It appears in small decisions. In choosing not to overanalyze a situation that does not require it. In allowing yourself to pause instead of reacting immediately. In recognizing when your effort is creating tension instead of progress. Each of these moments strengthens your ability to release control. And over time, something remarkable begins to happen. The need to control everything starts to fade. Not because you are forcing it to disappear, but because you begin to see that it was never as necessary as you believed. You start to experience a different way of moving through life, one that is not driven by constant pressure, but guided by awareness and trust. This does not mean you stop caring about your goals. It means your relationship with them changes. You no longer chase them with urgency and fear. You move toward them with clarity and intention, allowing space for the process to unfold. There is a quiet confidence that comes with this shift. It is not loud or dramatic. It does not need to prove anything. It is simply the understanding that you do not need to control everything in order for things to work out. That there is a balance between action and surrender, between effort and trust. And as you begin to live from that balance, you realize something that was not obvious before. Life was never something you had to force. It was something you were meant to move with. And the moment you stop gripping so tightly, you begin to feel it. A sense of ease, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer resisting what is. That is where true clarity begins, not in control, but in release. Chapter 3. The Masks You Wear and the Self You Hide. There comes a moment in every life when a quiet question begins to surface beneath everything else. It does not arrive loudly, and it rarely demands immediate attention. Instead, it lingers in the background, waiting patiently to be acknowledged. Who am I, really, beneath everything I show the world? Most people move through their lives without fully confronting this question, not because they are incapable of answering it, but because they have become deeply accustomed to the identities they have built over time. These identities feel real. They feel necessary. In many ways, they have helped you navigate the world, gain acceptance, avoid conflict, and create a sense of belonging. But they are not the whole truth. From a very early age, you begin to learn what is acceptable and what is not. You observe how people respond to your behavior. You notice which parts of you are praised and which are discouraged. Slowly, without realizing it, you begin to adjust. You highlight certain traits and suppress others. You present a version of yourself that fits more easily into the expectations around you. This is how the mask is formed. It is not created out of deception. It is created out of adaptation. It is your way of navigating a complex social environment where acceptance often feels conditional. Over time, this mask becomes so familiar that you stop questioning it. You begin to believe that it is who you are. But something never fully settles. There is often a subtle sense of disconnection, a feeling that despite functioning well on the surface, something deeper remains unexpressed. You may not be able to define it clearly, but you can feel it in moments of stillness, a quiet awareness that there is more to you than what you allow yourself to show. This is where the concept of the shadow begins to emerge. The shadow is not something negative, as it is often misunderstood. It is simply the collection of parts of yourself that you have pushed out of conscious awareness. Traits, emotions, desires, and tendencies that did not fit into the identity you believed you needed to maintain. These parts do not disappear. They remain within you, influencing your thoughts, your reactions, and your decisions in ways that are not always obvious. When ignored, they do not become weaker. In many cases, they become more pronounced, expressing themselves indirectly through behavior that feels out of alignment. You may notice this when you react more strongly than expected in certain situations, when a small comment triggers a disproportionate response. When you feel drawn to or repelled by something without fully understanding why. These are often signals of the shadow seeking acknowledgement. Avoiding the shadow does not eliminate it. It fragments you. You begin to operate from a divided sense of self, where one part of you is carefully presented to the world, while another part remains hidden, unacknowledged, and often misunderstood. This division creates internal tension. It requires constant effort to maintain. It prevents you from experiencing a sense of wholeness. Integration is the process that resolves this tension. It is not about removing parts of yourself or replacing them with something more acceptable. It is about recognizing, understanding, and accepting all aspects of who you are, even those that feel uncomfortable or unfamiliar. This requires honesty. A level of honesty that goes beyond surface-level self-reflection. It asks you to look at yourself without the filters you have been using for years. To observe your thoughts, your patterns, your reactions, without immediately judging or correcting them. At first, this can feel unsettling, because the identity you have built is not just a presentation to others. It is also how you have come to understand yourself. Letting go of that fixed identity can feel like losing stability. It can create uncertainty about who you are without it. But this uncertainty is not a loss. It is an opening. When you stop clinging to a rigid version of yourself, you create space for something more authentic to emerge. You begin to see that your identity is not fixed. It is fluid. It evolves as your awareness expands. And within that fluidity, there is a deeper truth that is not dependent on roles, expectations, or external validation. Authenticity is not about expressing every impulse or emotion without consideration. It is about alignment between your inner experience and your outer expression. It is about reducing the gap between what you feel and what you show. The smaller that gap becomes, the more coherent your experience of yourself becomes. This coherence has a powerful effect. It reduces internal conflict. It increases clarity. It allows your energy to move in a more focused and consistent way. Instead of being divided between maintaining a mask and managing what is hidden, you begin to operate as a unified whole. This is where your creative power begins to expand. When you are no longer suppressing parts of yourself, you gain access to a wider range of thoughts, ideas, and perspectives. You become less reactive and more responsive. You are able to engage with life more directly, without the constant need to filter and adjust your experience. There is also a shift in how you relate to others. When you are operating from a mask, your interactions are often shaped by the need to maintain that identity. You may seek approval, avoid disagreement, or adjust your behavior to fit the expectations of the moment. This creates a layer of distance in your relationships, even if it is subtle. When you begin to operate from authenticity, that distance decreases. Your interactions become more direct, more honest, and ultimately more meaningful. You are no longer trying to manage how you are perceived at every moment. Instead, you are engaging from a place of clarity and presence. This does not mean everyone will respond positively. In fact, some people may feel uncomfortable when you begin to change, especially if they are accustomed to a specific version of you. But authenticity is not about controlling how others respond. It is about being aligned with yourself, regardless of those responses. The process of integration also changes how you see others. As you become more aware of your own shadow, you begin to recognize it in the people around you, not as something to judge, but as something to understand. You realize that everyone is navigating their own internal divisions, their own masks, their own unacknowledged aspects. This awareness creates a deeper sense of compassion, not because you are trying to be compassionate, but because you see more clearly. You understand that behavior is often a reflection of something deeper, something that has not yet been fully integrated. This understanding reduces the need for immediate judgment. It allows you to respond with greater awareness rather than reacting based on assumptions or surface-level interpretations. But the most important shift happens within you. As you continue to integrate, you begin to trust yourself more. Not the version of yourself that is carefully constructed, but the deeper awareness that exists beneath it. You realize that you do not need to hide parts of yourself in order to function effectively. In fact, hiding them has been limiting your ability to fully engage with life. There is a strength in wholeness, a stability that does not depend on maintaining a specific image, a clarity that does not require constant validation. This strength is quiet, but it is consistent. It does not fluctuate based on external circumstances in the same way that a constructed identity does. It remains. This is why integration is essential to the journey you are on. Without it, the ideas of alignment, trust, and manifestation remain incomplete. Because if parts of you are still hidden or rejected, your focus becomes divided. Your intentions become unclear. Your energy becomes inconsistent. But when you are integrated, everything begins to align. Your thoughts, your actions, your intentions, and your awareness begin to move in the same direction. There is less contradiction, less internal resistance, and more clarity about what you truly want and why. This clarity is not forced. It emerges naturally when you are no longer fragmented, and as you move forward, you may begin to notice something subtle but significant. The need to perform starts to fade. You no longer feel the same pressure to present yourself in a certain way. You become more comfortable with not having everything perfectly defined. You allow yourself to be seen more fully, not because you are trying to prove something, but because there is less to hide. This is where authenticity becomes effortless, not because it requires no awareness, but because it is no longer something you are trying to achieve. It becomes your natural state when you are not divided against yourself. The masks may still appear at times. This is part of the process. Years of conditioning do not disappear instantly. But now you notice them. You recognize when you are shifting into a role that is not fully aligned. And in that recognition, you gain the ability to adjust, gently, without force. Over time, the mask loses its hold. Not because you fight against it, but because you no longer need it in the same way. You have found something more stable beneath it, something that does not depend on constant adjustment or approval. You have found yourself, not as a fixed identity, but as an ongoing awareness, something that continues to evolve, expand, and refine itself as you move through life. And in that awareness, there is a quiet freedom. A freedom that does not come from changing your external circumstances, but from no longer being limited by the version of yourself you thought you had to be. This is where your transformation deepens. Not in becoming someone new, but in allowing yourself to be fully who you already are. Chapter 4: The Power of Focus and the Direction of Your Reality. There is a force operating within your life that is so constant, so familiar, that it often goes unnoticed. It does not require effort to activate, it does not need to be learned. It is always functioning, whether you are aware of it or not. That force is your attention. Where your attention goes, your experience follows. At first, this idea may seem overly simple, almost too obvious to hold any real significance. But when you begin to observe it closely, you realize that it explains far more about your reality than you may have previously understood. Your attention is not passive, it is directional. It acts like a beam, continuously scanning your environment, your thoughts, your memories, and your expectations. And wherever that beam is directed, it begins to illuminate patterns, amplify certain details, and filter out others. This is not a metaphor, it is how perception works. At any given moment, there are countless details available to you. Sounds, sensations, information, possibilities. But you do not experience all of them equally. Your awareness selects what to focus on, and that selection shapes your reality. If your attention is consistently directed toward what is missing, what is uncertain, or what could go wrong, your experience will begin to reflect that focus. Not because the world itself has changed, but because your perception has filtered reality in a way that emphasizes those elements. Over time, this creates a pattern. You begin to see more of what you focus on. Not because it suddenly appears, but because you are now tuned to notice it. Your mind becomes efficient at identifying and reinforcing the very things you repeatedly give your attention to. This is where many people become trapped without realizing it. They believe they are simply observing reality as it is, when in fact they are participating in shaping how that reality appears to them. They focus on lack and then conclude that life is lacking. They focus on obstacles and then feel surrounded by them. The pattern feels external, but it is internally reinforced. This is why shifting your focus is not about ignoring reality. It is about changing the way you engage with it. There is a difference between awareness and fixation. Awareness allows you to recognize what is present without becoming consumed by it. Fixation narrows your perception, keeping your attention locked onto a specific aspect of your experience, often at the expense of everything else. When your focus becomes fixed on problems, your mind begins to search for more problems. It tries to confirm the pattern. It builds a narrative around it, and that narrative begins to feel like truth. But the moment you shift your focus, even slightly, something changes. You begin to notice possibilities that were previously invisible. You see alternatives where before there seemed to be none. You recognize that your experience is not as rigid as it once appeared. This shift is subtle, but it is powerful, because your attention does not just influence what you perceive. It influences how you think, how you feel, and how you act. It creates a chain reaction that extends far beyond the initial point of focus. Consider how a single thought can shape your entire state. If you focus on a past mistake, your mind begins to replay it. You analyze it, question it, and often judge it. This creates a certain emotional response, which then affects how you approach the present moment. Your energy shifts, your behavior adjusts. All from one point of focus. Now consider what happens when your attention is directed differently. When you focus on something that aligns with possibility, growth, or intention, your internal state begins to shift in that direction. Your thoughts become more constructive. Your emotions become more stable. Your actions become more aligned with what you want to create. This is not about forcing positive thinking, it is about understanding the mechanics of attention. Your mind is always moving. It is always focusing on something. The question is not whether you are focusing, but where that focus is being directed. And in many cases, it is being directed automatically. Conditioned patterns, past experiences, and habitual thinking often determine where your attention goes without your conscious input. You may find yourself repeatedly thinking about the same concerns, the same doubts, the same uncertainties. This repetition strengthens those patterns, but once you become aware of it, you gain a degree of choice. You begin to notice when your attention is being pulled in a direction that does not serve you, and in that moment of noticing, you create space to redirect it. This does not require force. In fact, forcing your attention often creates more tension. Instead, it involves gently guiding it, bringing it back again and again to what you intentionally choose to focus on. This is where the idea of your attention as a lighthouse becomes meaningful. A lighthouse does not chase ships. It does not move erratically, trying to illuminate everything at once. It remains steady, focused, and consistent. Its power comes from its stability. In the same way, the consistency of your focus determines its impact. Occasional shifts in attention are not enough to create lasting change. It is the repeated, sustained direction of your awareness that begins to reshape your perception and, over time, your experience. This is why clarity often feels unstable for many people. They may have moments where they feel aligned, where their focus is clear and intentional. But those moments are often interrupted by habitual patterns that pull their attention back into old ways of thinking. The result is inconsistency. And inconsistency weakens the effect of your focus. Developing the ability to maintain intentional focus does not happen instantly. It is a process. It requires awareness, patience, and repetition. But as you continue to practice it, something begins to stabilize within you. Your mind becomes less reactive. You are no longer pulled as easily into every thought or distraction. You begin to observe your thoughts rather than immediately identifying with them. This creates a separation between your awareness and the content of your mind. And within that separation, you gain control over your focus. This is where your creative power begins to expand. Because when your attention is no longer scattered or dominated by automatic patterns, it becomes a tool you can use deliberately. You can direct it toward what you want to build, what you want to understand, and what you want to experience. This does not mean ignoring challenges. It means engaging with them from a place of clarity rather than fixation. You can acknowledge a problem without allowing it to consume your entire field of attention. You can address it directly, then return your focus to what matters most. This balance is essential. Without it, focusing only on what you want while ignoring reality creates disconnection. But focusing only on problems creates limitation. The ability to move between awareness and intentional focus allows you to remain grounded while still directing your experience. There is also an important relationship between focus and belief. What you consistently focus on begins to feel more real. It becomes familiar. And familiarity strengthens belief. Over time, your repeated focus shapes what you consider possible and what you consider out of reach. This is why many limitations are not external. They are reinforced through patterns of attention. If you have consistently focused on doubt, your belief system will reflect that. If you have consistently focused on possibility, your belief system will expand accordingly. The shift does not happen overnight, but it happens inevitably when your focus becomes consistent. This is not about convincing yourself of something that feels untrue. It is about gradually shifting your attention in a way that allows new patterns to form naturally. As those patterns strengthen, your perception changes. And as your perception changes, your experience follows. You begin to see opportunities where you once saw obstacles. You begin to act with more clarity and less hesitation. You begin to feel a sense of direction that is not forced, but emerges from your alignment with what you are focusing on. And this is where the deeper implication becomes clear. Your reality is not just something you move through. It is something you participate in shaping, moment by moment, through the direction of your attention. This does not mean you control everything. But it does mean you influence far more than you may have realized. The question, then, is not whether your attention has power. It is whether you are using that power consciously. Because as you continue to move forward, one thing becomes increasingly evident. Your focus is not just shaping what you see, it is shaping who you become. Chapter 5: The Voice Within and the Language of Intuition. There is a form of guidance that does not arrive through logic, instruction, or external validation. It does not argue for your attention, nor does it attempt to prove itself through evidence. It is quiet, consistent, and often overlooked. This is the voice within you. Many people spend their lives searching for direction outside of themselves. They look for answers in systems, in other people's opinions, in structured methods that promise certainty. And while external knowledge has its place, it cannot replace something far more immediate and precise: your inner guidance. The difficulty is not that this guidance is absent, it is that it is often overshadowed. From an early stage, you are trained to prioritize external authority. You are taught to trust what can be measured, explained, and verified by others. Over time, this creates a dependence on outside input, where your own internal signals begin to feel less reliable, less valid. But those signals never disappear. They remain present beneath the surface, waiting to be recognized. Intuition does not operate in the same way as analytical thought. It does not present a step-by-step explanation. It does not always make immediate sense. In many cases, it appears as a subtle feeling, a sense of knowing that cannot be fully articulated. This is why it is often dismissed. The mind prefers clarity that can be explained. It prefers conclusions that can be justified. Intuition offers something different. It offers direction without immediate explanation. At first, this can feel uncomfortable, because following intuition requires a level of trust that goes beyond logic. It asks you to move without having every detail confirmed. It invites you to act on a sense rather than a certainty. But there is a reason this form of guidance exists. Your analytical mind processes information based on what it already knows. It draws from past experiences, learned patterns, and available data. While this is useful, it is also limited. It cannot account for variables it has not yet encountered. Intuition operates beyond those limitations. It integrates information in a way that is not always conscious. It detects patterns, subtle shifts, and underlying connections that may not yet be visible to your rational mind. It presents this information as a feeling, a direction, a quiet suggestion. This is why intuition often appears before clarity. It guides you towards something before you fully understand why. You may have experienced this in moments where you felt drawn to a decision that did not seem entirely logical at the time. A choice that others questioned, or that you could not fully explain, yet something within you remained certain. And later, the reasoning became clear. This is how intuition works. It does not wait for complete understanding. It moves ahead of it. The challenge is learning to recognize the difference between intuition and other internal signals. Not every thought or feeling is intuitive. Some are based on fear, habit, or conditioning. These can feel just as strong, but they operate differently. Fear is often urgent. It pushes you to react quickly, to avoid discomfort, to seek immediate resolution. It tends to narrow your perspective, focusing on potential problems and worst-case scenarios. Intuition is different. It is calm. Even when it points you towards something uncertain, it does not create panic. It does not demand immediate action. It simply presents a direction and allows you to respond. This distinction is subtle, but it becomes clearer with attention. As you begin to observe your internal responses more closely, you start to notice patterns. You recognize the tone of fear, the pressure of overthinking, and the quiet clarity of intuitive guidance. This awareness is essential, because without it, all internal signals can become blended together, making it difficult to know what to trust. But as you develop this sensitivity, your ability to discern becomes stronger. You begin to trust yourself in a deeper way. Not blindly, but with awareness. This trust is not built through a single decision. It develops over time, through repeated experiences of listening, acting, and observing the outcome. Each time you follow your intuition and see where it leads, your confidence in it grows. And each time you ignore it, you may notice a different kind of response, a sense that you moved against something you already knew. This is not about judging those moments, it is about learning from them. The more you pay attention, the more consistent your intuition becomes, not because it changes, but because you are finally noticing it. There is also a language to intuition. It does not speak in sentences. It communicates through impressions, sensations, and subtle shifts in awareness. It may appear as a sense of ease when something aligns, or a quiet resistance when something is not right. These signals are often simple, but they are precise. The difficulty lies in the fact that they are easy to override. The mind can quickly introduce doubt. It can question the validity of what you feel. It can create alternative explanations that seem more logical, more acceptable, more safe. And in doing so, it can lead you away from your initial sense of direction. This is why presence is important. Intuition is most accessible when your mind is not overwhelmed with constant thinking. When there is space between your thoughts, when you are not trying to force answers, when you allow yourself to simply observe. In that space, something becomes clearer. You begin to notice the difference between thinking about what to do and sensing what feels right. You recognize that not all decisions require extended analysis. Some require attention to what is already being indicated within you. This does not mean abandoning logic. It means integrating it. There are moments where analysis is necessary, where careful planning and structured thinking are required. But there are also moments where intuition provides a more direct path. The ability to move between these modes is what creates balance. Relying only on logic can lead to overthinking and hesitation. Relying only on intuition without awareness can lead to inconsistency. But when both are aligned, your decision-making becomes more effective. You act with clarity and confidence. There is also an important shift that occurs when you begin to trust your inner guidance. You become less dependent on external validation. You still value input from others. You still consider different perspectives. But you are no longer waiting for confirmation before you move forward. You are able to listen, reflect, and then return to your own sense of direction. This independence is not isolation, it is alignment. You are no longer pulled in multiple directions by conflicting opinions. You are able to remain centered even when external input varies. You recognize that while others may offer insight, the final decision must come from within you. This realization changes how you move through life. You begin to take responsibility for your choices in a different way, not as a burden, but as an expression of your awareness. You understand that your path is not something that can be fully defined by others. It is something you must navigate yourself. And as you continue to do this, something becomes increasingly clear. You are not being guided randomly. There is a pattern to the signals you receive, a consistency that becomes more visible over time. You begin to notice that certain directions lead to growth, even if they are not immediately comfortable. Others lead to stagnation, even if they feel safe in the moment. This pattern is not imposed from outside. It emerges from your alignment with your own development. Your intuition is not separate from you. It is an extension of your awareness, operating at a level that is not always conscious, but always present. And as you learn to listen to it, to trust it, and to act on it with clarity, you begin to experience something that many people spend years searching for. A sense of direction that is not forced. A path that does not need constant validation. A quiet certainty that you are moving in alignment with something deeper than surface-level decision-making. This is the beginning of inner authority, not authority over others, but authority within yourself. The understanding that you are not lost, even when the path is not fully visible, that you are not uncertain, even when the outcome is not guaranteed. Because you are no longer relying solely on what you can see, you are learning to trust what you can feel. And in that trust, something powerful begins to unfold. You stop searching for signs everywhere and start recognizing that you have been the signal all along. Chapter 6. Becoming the Creator, not the Seeker. For much of your life, you have been taught to search. Search for answers, for opportunities, for clarity, for validation, for something that feels just out of reach. This search can become so constant that it begins to feel like your natural state. You move from one idea to another, one method to another, one goal to another, always believing that what you need is somewhere ahead of you. This is the mindset of the seeker. There is nothing inherently wrong with seeking. It is often the beginning of awareness. It is what leads you to question, to explore, to expand beyond what you previously understood. But there is a point where seeking, if not recognized, becomes a cycle where you are always looking but never arriving. You gather information, you learn new concepts, You listen, you analyze, you reflect. But something remains incomplete. There is always another answer to find, another layer to uncover, another step before you feel ready. This is where the shift must occur. Because at some point, continuing to seek becomes a form of avoidance. Not intentional avoidance, but subtle. You remain in the position of the observer, the learner, the one who is preparing. And while preparation feels productive, it can also delay action indefinitely. You begin to wait. Wait until you feel more certain. Wait until you understand everything more clearly. Wait until you feel fully ready. But that moment rarely arrives in the way you expect it to, because readiness is not something you reach before you begin. It is something that develops as you move. This is the transition from seeker to creator. A creator does not wait for perfect clarity. A creator moves with the clarity that is available and allows the next level to reveal itself through action. This does not mean acting without awareness. It means recognizing that awareness deepens through engagement, not just observation. When you shift into this mindset, your relationship with knowledge changes. You are no longer collecting ideas for the sake of understanding them. You are applying them, testing them, refining them through your own experience. What was once theoretical becomes practical. What was once distant becomes immediate. You begin to participate. This participation is what activates your creative power. Creation is not limited to physical outcomes. It includes how you think, how you respond, how you interpret your experiences. Every moment, you are shaping your reality through the way you engage with it. The difference is whether you are doing it consciously or unconsciously. When you are in the seeker mindset, much of this process happens unconsciously. You react based on patterns, habits, and conditioning. You may not realize how much influence you have over your own experience. But when you step into the role of the creator, that awareness changes. You begin to notice your thoughts as they arise. You recognize how they influence your emotions, your decisions, your actions. You see the connection between your internal state and your external experience. This awareness gives you choice, not complete control over everything that happens, but influence over how you engage with it. And that influence is powerful. It allows you to shift patterns that once felt automatic. It allows you to respond differently to situations that used to trigger the same reactions. It allows you to move with intention rather than habit. This is where your creative responsibility begins, not as pressure, but as awareness. You begin to understand that you are not just experiencing life. You are interacting with it in a way that shapes its direction. Your focus, your decisions, your responses all contribute to the outcomes you experience over time. This realization can feel overwhelming at first, because it removes the idea that everything is happening to you. It introduces the idea that you are involved in the process more deeply than you may have realized. But within that realization is also freedom. Because if you are involved in creating your experience, you are not limited to repeating the same patterns indefinitely. You can change them. This change does not require dramatic actions. It begins with subtle shifts, choosing a different thought when you notice a familiar pattern, responding differently in a situation that would have previously triggered the same reaction, allowing yourself to move forward even when certainty is not complete. These small changes accumulate. Over time, they begin to reshape your experience in ways that are noticeable. What once felt fixed begins to feel flexible. What once felt repetitive begins to shift. This is how creation works, not through sudden transformation, but through consistent, conscious engagement. There is also an important relationship between creation and identity. When you see yourself as a seeker, your identity is tied to searching. You're always looking for something outside of yourself to complete your understanding. But when you begin to see yourself as a creator, your identity shifts. You are no longer waiting to find something, you are actively shaping what you experience. This does not mean you have all the answers, it means you trust your ability to navigate without needing all of them at once. This trust is essential because without it, you will return to seeking for certainty before taking action. And certainty, in its absolute form, is rarely available. There will always be unknowns, variables, possibilities that cannot be fully predicted. Creation requires moving forward despite that. It requires a willingness to engage with uncertainty, not as something to avoid, but as something to work with. It requires recognizing that clarity often comes after action, not before it. This is why many opportunities are missed. Not because they are not available, but because they do not arrive with complete certainty. They appear as possibilities, as directions, as moments that require a decision without full information. The seeker hesitates, the creator moves. Not recklessly, but with awareness, with the understanding that movement itself generates feedback, that each step reveals something new. That progress is not linear, but adaptive. As you begin to adopt this approach, your relationship with mistakes also changes. Mistakes are no longer seen as failures. They are seen as information, as part of the process of refining your direction. This reduces the fear of taking action because the outcome is no longer defined as simply success or failure. It becomes learning. And learning is continuous. This perspective allows you to remain in motion, to adjust, to refine, to improve, without becoming stuck in self-judgment or hesitation. It creates a momentum that builds over time, carrying you forward even when the path is not fully clear. There is also a deeper layer to this shift. When you move from seeking to creating, you begin to realize that what you were searching for externally was often a reflection of something internal. Clarity, confidence, direction, purpose. These are not things that can be fully given to you by others. They emerge through your own engagement, through the way you think, the way you act, the way you respond to your experiences. They are developed, not delivered. This is why external answers often feel temporary. They may provide insight, but unless they are integrated into your own awareness and applied in your own life, they remain separate from your experience. It brings understanding into action. And as you continue to operate from this space, something begins to stabilize within you. You are no longer constantly searching for the next answer. You are working with what you have, expanding it through experience, refining it through awareness. You become more self-directed, more grounded, more clear in your movement. There is less urgency. Not because you have stopped caring, but because you are no longer chasing something that feels out of reach. You are engaged in a process that is unfolding in real time through your own participation. This is where a deeper sense of confidence begins to emerge, not the kind that depends on external success, but the kind that comes from trusting your ability to navigate whatever arises. You understand that you do not need to have everything figured out to move forward effectively. You need awareness. You need intention, and you need the willingness to act. As this becomes more natural, you begin to see your life differently, not as a series of events that you are trying to control or predict, but as a dynamic process that you are actively shaping. Each decision, each focus, each response becomes part of that process. You are no longer waiting for your life to begin. You are creating it moment by moment. And in that realization, something shifts permanently. You stop asking when things will change, and start recognizing that change is already happening through you. That is the moment you stop being a seeker and fully become the creator. Chapter 7: Alignment, Timing, and the Unseen Order of Things. There are moments in life when everything seems to come together with surprising ease. The right conversation happens at the right time. An opportunity appears just as you are ready for it. A decision that once felt complicated becomes clear without force. These moments often feel rare, almost accidental, as if you have briefly stepped into a different version of reality where things simply work. But these moments are not random. They are examples of alignment. Alignment is not something you create through effort alone. It is something you enter when your internal state and your external actions begin to move in the same direction. It is when your thoughts, your intentions, your focus, and your behavior are no longer in conflict with one another. Most of the time, this is not the case. There is often a subtle mismatch between what you want and how you are thinking, between what you intend and how you are acting. You may say you want clarity, but your mind is filled with doubt. You may say you want progress, but your actions are inconsistent. You may say you trust the process, but internally you are resisting uncertainty. This creates friction, and that friction disrupts alignment. When you are not aligned, everything feels more difficult than it needs to be. Decisions take longer, actions feel heavier, progress seems slower. It can feel as though life is pushing back against you, even when you are trying your best to move forward. But what you are experiencing is not resistance from life itself. It is the result of internal contradiction. Alignment begins when that contradiction starts to dissolve. This does not mean everything becomes perfect. It means that your internal and external states begin to support each other rather than oppose each other. Your thoughts reinforce your direction instead of questioning it. Your actions reflect your intentions instead of delaying them. This creates momentum. And momentum changes how things unfold. When you are aligned, you begin to notice a different quality in your experience. There is less hesitation, less second-guessing, less need to force outcomes. You move with a sense of clarity that feels stable, even if the path ahead is not fully visible. This is where timing becomes important. There is a natural rhythm to how things unfold. Not everything is meant to happen immediately. Not every idea is ready to become action the moment it appears. Some things require preparation, not in the sense of waiting passively, but in the sense of allowing conditions to develop. Timing is often misunderstood as something external and uncontrollable. But in many cases, timing is directly connected to alignment. When you are not aligned, even the right opportunity can feel out of place. You may hesitate, overthink, or fail to recognize it altogether. But when you are aligned, you are more receptive. You are able to recognize opportunities as they appear and respond to them effectively. This is why the same situation can produce different outcomes at different times. It is not just about the situation itself. It is about your state when you encounter it. There are moments in your life where something did not work out, only to later realize that you were not ready for it in the way you thought you were. Not because you lacked ability, but because your internal state was not yet aligned with what that situation required. At the time, it may have felt like a missed opportunity, but in retrospect, it becomes clear that it was a matter of timing. This perspective changes how you interpret delays. Instead of seeing them as failures or obstacles, you begin to see them as part of a larger process. Not everything that is delayed is denied. Sometimes it is being positioned in a way that will make more sense when the alignment is complete. This does not mean you become passive. Alignment is not about waiting for things to happen. It is about preparing yourself in a way that allows you to move effectively when the moment arrives. It is about refining your focus, your clarity, and your actions so that when opportunities appear, you are ready to engage with them. There is also an unseen order to how events connect. At any given moment, there are multiple variables interacting. People making decisions, circumstances shifting, information moving, patterns forming. You are part of this network, but you are not controlling it entirely. And yet, when you are aligned, you begin to intersect with this network differently. You find yourself in the right place at the right time more often. Conversations become more relevant. Decisions become more intuitive. Outcomes begin to reflect a level of coordination that feels beyond deliberate planning. This is not coincidence. It is the result of moving in sync with a larger process. You may not always see the full structure of this process, but you can observe its effects. The way certain events lead to others, the way one decision opens the path for another. The way clarity emerges, not all at once, but step by step. This is why forcing outcomes often disrupts alignment. When you try to control every detail, you narrow your focus too much. You become rigid in your expectations. You attempt to shape reality according to a specific plan, leaving little room for adaptation. This rigidity creates resistance. Because life does not unfold in a perfectly predictable way. It requires flexibility, responsiveness, and the ability to adjust as new information becomes available. Alignment provides that flexibility. It allows you to move with intention while remaining open to change. You are not fixed in one direction. You are responsive to the process as it unfolds. This responsiveness increases your effectiveness because you are working with the situation rather than against it. There is also a level of trust involved in this. Not blind trust, but informed trust, the understanding that not everything needs to be forced into place. That there is a structure to how things develop, even if it is not immediately visible. That your role is not to control every variable, but to engage with the ones within your reach. This trust reduces unnecessary pressure. You are no longer trying to solve everything at once. You focus on what is in front of you, what is available now, what can be acted on in the present moment. And as you do that, the next step becomes clearer. This is how alignment and timing work together. Alignment prepares you. Timing presents the opportunity. When both are present, movement becomes natural. You do not need to push as hard. You do not need to question every step. You move with a sense of direction that feels both intentional and responsive. And as you continue to operate in this way, something becomes increasingly evident. There is a pattern to your progress. It is not linear. There are periods of movement and periods of stillness, periods where things accelerate and periods where they seem to pause. But each phase serves a purpose. Each phase contributes to the overall development of your path. The difficulty is in recognizing the value of each phase while you are in it. It is easy to appreciate movement. It is more challenging to appreciate stillness, but stillness often provides the space needed for alignment to deepen. It allows you to reassess, to refine, to adjust your direction without the pressure of constant action. This balance is essential. Without it, you may push forward when reflection is needed or hesitate when action is required. Alignment helps you recognize which is appropriate in each moment. And as this awareness develops, you begin to move with greater precision. You act when it is time to act. You wait when it is time to wait, not out of indecision, but out of clarity. This clarity is what creates a sense of flow, not a perfect, uninterrupted flow, but a consistent movement that feels connected rather than forced. A process where each step builds on the previous one, even if the full picture is not yet visible. And within that process, something deeper becomes clear. You are not separate from the unfolding of your life. You are part of it. Your thoughts, your actions, your focus, your awareness all contribute to how it develops. And when these elements are aligned, when they move in the same direction, the path begins to reveal itself in ways that cannot be forced. This is the unseen order, not rigid, not predetermined in every detail, but structured enough to guide you when you are willing to move with it. And the more you recognize it, the more you begin to trust it, not because you have proof of every outcome, but because you have experienced what happens when you are aligned with it. Things begin to connect. Not perfectly, not instantly, but consistently enough to show you that there is a pattern. And once you see that pattern, you no longer feel the need to control everything. You focus on alignment, you respect timing, and you allow the rest to unfold. Chapter 8: The Shadow Self and the Power of Integration. There is a part of you that you may have spent a lifetime trying to ignore. A part that does not fit the image you present to the world, a part that you hide behind smiles, politeness, or the pursuit of perfection. This is the shadow self. It is not evil, wrong, or broken. It is simply the aspects of your being that society, conditioning, or fear have taught you to suppress. For many, the shadow self is associated with discomfort. It carries emotions, desires, and impulses that feel unacceptable or inconvenient. It may include fear, anger, jealousy, or doubt. It may carry parts of your identity that you have neglected, creative impulses, intuitive insights, or unconventional ideas that you are afraid to express. And yet, this shadow is an essential part of your wholeness. Integration begins with acknowledgement. You cannot transform what you do not recognize. Many people spend energy trying to overcome or eliminate their shadows. They pursue self-improvement as a battle against themselves, striving to become better without understanding what better truly means. This often results in exhaustion, frustration, and a sense of incompleteness. True growth comes not from suppression, but from integration. When you allow yourself to observe your shadow without judgment, you create space for understanding. You begin to see how these aspects of yourself influence your thoughts, behaviors, and relationships. You discover patterns you were previously unaware of, patterns that may have kept you repeating the same cycles or attracting experiences that no longer serve your highest self. Integration requires courage. It asks you to look at yourself fully, without pretending that only your light exists. It challenges the narrative you have been telling yourself, the story that you are always strong, always in control, always good. By embracing your shadow, you reclaim energy that was previously spent hiding or denying it. That energy can be redirected toward creativity, intuition, and authentic self-expression. Your shadow also holds keys to your personal power. Traits that feel threatening or unacceptable often contain hidden gifts. A quick temper, for example, may indicate a deep sense of justice. Self-doubt may be a gateway to humility and empathy. Repressed creativity may contain the spark for innovation or artistry. When integrated, these traits become assets rather than liabilities. Integration is not a one-time event, it is a continual process. The shadow is dynamic, revealing itself in new ways as you grow. Each time you confront it, you learn more about your internal motivations, fears, and desires. Each time you embrace it, your sense of wholeness deepens. This process of integration is closely tied to authenticity. Authenticity is the alignment of your inner world with your outer expression. When you ignore your shadow, authenticity is incomplete. You present only a curated version of yourself, and this creates tension between who you are and who you appear to be. When you integrate your shadow, you no longer need to wear masks. You can engage with life more fully, without hiding parts of yourself or seeking approval from others to validate your worth. Embracing the shadow also enhances your relationships. When you understand and accept your own complexity, you become more tolerant of others' complexities. You no longer demand perfection from those around you, nor do you fear rejection when others reveal their true selves. Connection deepens because it is based on mutual authenticity rather than idealized versions of each other. The shadow also has a role in creativity and manifestation. Suppressed parts of yourself carry latent energy that can be harnessed for growth. By integrating these aspects, you unlock creative potential that was previously blocked. You gain the ability to see opportunities where others see obstacles, to generate solutions where others see problems, and to act with a confidence rooted in wholeness rather than fragility. The first step toward integration is observation. Notice the patterns that trigger strong emotions or resistance. Journal about moments when you felt compelled to hide, deny, or avoid something about yourself. Reflect on what these experiences reveal about your inner world. Ask yourself, what is this shadow trying to teach me? The next step is acceptance. Allow yourself to feel, experience, and acknowledge these parts of yourself without judgment. Acceptance does not mean resignation or indulgence. It means recognizing that these aspects exist and have value. Acceptance dissolves the inner conflict that arises from resistance, creating space for constructive transformation. The final step is conscious action. Choose behaviors, thoughts, and expressions that honor both your light and shadow. Speak your truth, even when it feels vulnerable. Take creative risks, even when uncertainty is present. Respond to situations with awareness, acknowledging the parts of yourself that are often hidden. Integration is transformative because it changes your internal landscape. Where once there was tension between who you are and who you show yourself to be, there is now coherence. Where once there was fear of judgment or rejection, there is now confidence rooted in authenticity. Where once energy was scattered in avoidance, it is now focused in deliberate creation. Shadow work is not always comfortable. It can bring discomfort, pain, and the resurfacing of old wounds. But within that discomfort lies growth. Each confrontation with the shadow is an invitation to expand, to deepen your self-understanding, and to reclaim your full potential. When the shadow is embraced and integrated, your entire experience of life changes. You notice that challenges no longer trigger the same level of anxiety because you are grounded in self-acceptance. You begin to trust your intuition more deeply because you are aware of the underlying patterns in your mind. You attract experiences and people that resonate with your authentic self rather than chasing approval or validation. Integration also strengthens your creative power. Your focus becomes sharper because your energy is no longer divided between hiding and expressing. Your intentions become more potent because they are aligned with the totality of your being. Your ability to manifest what you desire is amplified because it emerges from a foundation of authenticity, awareness, and self-trust. Shadow work, integration, and authenticity are ongoing processes, not destinations. They require attention, reflection, and the willingness to confront whatever arises within you. But the rewards are profound: a life lived fully, a self understood deeply, and the capacity to engage with the world from a place of wholeness. When you embrace the shadow, you reclaim not only parts of yourself that were hidden, but also the energy, creativity, and clarity that were bound within it. You move from a fragmented state to a harmonious one. You move from being reactive to being intentional. You move from seeking validation outside to finding certainty within. Ultimately, shadow integration is about freedom. Freedom from self-judgment, freedom from fear of judgment, freedom from hiding. It is about stepping fully into your life with all your complexity, creativity, and power intact. It is about becoming whole, not just in moments, but consistently across every aspect of your experience. This is the gateway to authentic living, conscious creation, and the realization of your highest potential.